Hello, this is Music Tech Help Guy, and welcome to episode 27 of my Logic Pro 10 video tutorial series. In this episode, we'll take a look at the piano roll editor and how to create and edit MIDI data. Now, this will probably end up being a multi-part video. There's more information that I want to pack into any single video, so this will probably end up being a 2 or 3 part video. So piano roll editors are also known as matrix editors because you basically have pitch vertically and rhythm horizontally. In this case, with the piano roll editor, you see a piano with low pitches on the bottom, high pitches on top, and then we see our ruler on top showing rhythm. So what I have here in this session is I've got a hard wobble bass track and I have a heavy metal organ. The heavy metal organ is just a preset from Logic's library, and the hard wobble bass is an instrument I made. What I'm going to do first before I start playing these instruments is I want to change my time signature, or the meter of my project. By default, as you probably already know, Logic sets its meter to 4/4 time, meaning that you have 4 beats per measure. So what I'm going to do is show my global tracks here by clicking right here, and then signature should show up here. If it doesn't, you can right click and then you can just say show signature. Since mine is there, it says hide signature and I can hide it. And there's other things you can show here, but none of which we're going to use today. So with my signature, you can see it's 4/4 time. So I'm just going to double click on that. And I can choose a new time signature. So I'm going to type in 3/4. So I'm going to have 3 beats per measure and then hit OK. All right. So with my hard wobble bass here, first I'm just going to record in a basic, just a bass line with it. And just arm the track for recording by hitting the R there and then hit R on the keyboard to record. And there we go. I just recorded in some MIDI data. Now, the way one of the ways you can open up the piano roll editor is you can click on an existing MIDI region, and you can just double click on it actually, and it'll open up in the piano roll editor, just in your arrange window. I like to see the piano roll editor in its own window because I can just see more. It's easier to work with. So you just click on it and then you hit Command 4. Now, I know in Logic 9, it was actually Command 6, not Command 4. They've changed it since then. And what we can see here is all of our MIDI data that I just played in. You can see the bass line I just played in. And, you can see I'm pretty off the grid. Part of the issue is I'm not really sure what the issue is. I thought I played in time, but I guess I didn't play in time. So what we can do just to start is we can hit Command A to select all the notes. And what I can do is move these notes closer to the grid. Now, this kind of harder white line here is the downbeat of measure 3. So I want that note to come in right on the downbeat, not off of the beat. So I'm just going to grab it with my regular pointer tool here, just like we saw back in the editing videos, and just pull straight to the right until it kind of snaps to the grid. Now, one thing that can be kind of annoying is if you click on a note, it actually plays the note. Sometimes you might want that. Most of the time you don't. So to turn that off, you just click on this green icon here, MIDI out, and it disables MIDI out when you click on notes or drag or select notes. So now I don't hear them. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to quantize my recording. Now, quantization is essentially just the rhythmic correction of MIDI notes. There's other things to it as well, but that's the basic function of it. So what you kind of have to know is what notes you played, on top of the time signature that we chose. And looking at the grid, I can see here that the best quantization value is probably an 8th note. Now, if you're not familiar with music theory or rhythm, this might be a little more difficult for you, but by default, each of these small divisions in Logic is a 16th note. And so each pair of those would be an 8th note, and every 4th one would be a quarter note. So you kind of have to decide what's the value that you want to snap to, 8th note, 16th note, quarter note. And there's triplet values and things like that we'll talk about later. So what I'm going to do is hit Command A once again to select all the notes, go over here to time quantize, and in time quantize, I can choose a quantization value. So I'm going to choose an eighth note. And what you'll see is that all of the notes that I played now snap to their nearest eighth note. Another little trick that we can do here is I can get rid of the overlap between notes, and I can also, if there's a gap between two notes, I can also fill that gap. And the key command for this is the backslash button. It's right below the delete key on a Mac keyboard. So if you hit backslash, what it does is it corrects the note overlap between notes, so you don't have note overlap. The other key command you can use is shift backslash, and that's called a force legato function. And if you saw that there, just watch up here. So shift backslash, and it forces legato between notes. So if there's again, notes that overlap and then notes that don't quite join completely, you can trim them and kind of auto trim them, and you can also fill the gaps between them. Now, if you forget those key commands, they're up under edit and then trim, and there's two functions. You have note to remove overlaps with adjacent backslash, and then you have note end to following notes, force legato, shift backslash. I don't know why they changed the terminology on this. They used to just be called note overlap correction and force legato, and it also used to be the hyphen key, not the backslash key in Logic 9. So this is another thing that's changed in Logic 10. So let's take a listen to what we've got here. I'll just click on the ruler here and hit spacebar to play. And there we go. Our recording is kind of, perfectly in time. All right. The next thing I'm going to do is just kind of break down the piano roll editing tools. Just like with the arrange window I showed you in one of the previous videos, the piano roll editor has its own set of edit tools, and they're located in the same place that they were in the arrange area, just the top of the window. By default, you get the pointer tool, which I already showed you before. You can select notes, you can grab notes. You can also trim notes with this just by hovering over the right or left side of a note. You can trim a note to be shorter from the back end or from the front end. So that's kind of cool. The other thing that you can do is you can duplicate notes. If you hold Option and then drag with the pointer tool, you can duplicate a note. You can also drag over a note and hit delete to delete it. And then you can also drag over a note and hit Option and press up or down to transpose a note up or down. So I can bump it up or bump it down by a step or a semitone, basically a half step. Another thing that you can do is if you hold Shift Option and press up and down, you can bump all of your notes or a note up or down a full octave. So if maybe I want to pull the bass line up or maybe down an octave, you can do that. So that's the pointer tool. The next tool is the pencil tool. And what the pencil tool does is it just lets you create new notes. Now, the rule about the pencil tool is that it will always create a note at the same length and velocity as the last note that you created. And by the way, you can also trim with your pencil tool. So if I trim this note to be a little shorter, the next note I create is going to be equal value to the last one I created. So I'm just going to use my pencil tool to delete those notes. The next tool is the eraser tool. Basically, all it does is it deletes notes. We can do that same thing with the delete key, so it's basically useless here, but we'll find another function for it later. The next tool is the finger tool. Finger tool basically just trims notes. It doesn't move them, it doesn't transpose them, it just trims notes. And again, we could do that same thing with the pointer tool, so it's basically useless. The scissors tool lets you separate notes, just like you could separate waveforms up in the arrange area. The glue tool will glue notes together. If you drag over two notes to the same pitch and then click on them with the glue tool, it'll join them together. And you can also join together notes that were separated with the scissors tool. The mute tool basically mutes a note, and you'll see that it turns gray here. Basically what that means is that the note is still there, you just won't hear it. So it's a way to kind of turn off a note or turn off a series of notes to audition something with and without those notes, without actually deleting them. There's actually a key command for the mute tool though. If you click on a note and then hit Control M, it actually does the exact same thing. By the way, I realized in Logic 9 it was actually just M, not Control M. The next tool is the Quantize tool. The Quantize tool will quantize to whatever value you've chosen over here in the quantization menu, but it only quantizes one note at a time or a selection of notes at a time. So if I choose a time quantize of a quarter note, every note I click on with the Quantize tool will quantize to the nearest quarter note, or I can select a series of notes and all of those notes will quantize to the quarter note. All right, the next tool is the velocity tool, which we'll come back to in just a moment. So let's go on to the zoom tool. You can just drag to zoom in, click to zoom back out. But honestly, I like to just use the zoom sliders up here or use the shortcuts for zooming. You can hold Option and swipe up and down for vertical zoom, and you can hold Option Command and swipe up and down for horizontal zoom. And then remember the kind of zoom to fit window is you just click on the background, hit Z. This also applies in the piano roll editor. Okay, so let's talk about the velocity tool. One quick thing just about the tools is that just like in the arrange window, the one on the left is your left click tool, the one on the right is your command click tool. So I'm going to put the velocity tool in the command click tool, so I have to hold command in order to use the velocity tool. Now, when you use the velocity tool, you can basically drag up or down on a note to increase or decrease the velocity. Now, MIDI note velocity is essentially how fast you hit the key, but what it ends up being most of the time is how loud the note is, and it's always a value between 0 and 127. Usually 1 and 127 though, because 0 is just interpreted as muted or off. So 1 would be the lowest, the softest velocity, 127 would be the loudest velocity. So as I drag the note up, it gets more red, a louder velocity, and as I drag down, it gets more blue, a lower velocity. So I like how Logic colorizes velocity. The other thing that you can, the other way to distinguish velocity is that the line in the note will actually shrink or expand depending on how high or how low the note is. So if you're colorblind or something, well, you can still see what velocity you're looking at. The other thing you can do is you can set all of the velocities of all your notes to the same value by selecting them all, engaging the velocity tool, and instead of just dragging up or down with it, you hold Option while dragging up and down, and it'll essentially quantize the velocity to all the same values. So all of my notes are now the same value. Another way to adjust velocity is right over here. There's a velocity slider, which is kind of a new addition to Logic that I do like. So we can pull all of these up or pull all of them down. So let's go to about 100. There we go. So that covers most of the tools in the piano roll editor. The automation select and automation curve tool, we'll come back to those in another video, probably the next video or the third video of this series, but we'll come back to those later, so don't worry about them for now. All right, so now that we've got our bass line down here, you probably noticed that there's these little kind of grayed bars on the region. These are aftertouch values. My MIDI keyboard has a function called aftertouch, where if you press down on the key and then press harder on the key, you can get a different effect out of it. Because this patch doesn't understand what aftertouch is, or there's no effect paired with aftertouch, there's no point in having aftertouch on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off aftertouch right now. And the way you do that is you go up to File, Project Settings, MIDI, and from here you can go to Input Filter. This is your MIDI input filter. And I'm going to turn off aftertouch. And you can turn off other things as well, like control changes, pitch bend, even notes if you want to. So this is just a way to kind of filter what messages actually come from your MIDI controller and get recorded in Logic. And I'll turn off polyphonic aftertouch as well. All right. So let's record in our top instrument. Because the part I want to record in here is a little faster, instead of trying to play it in live, I'm going to use a special function called step input, which lets me punch in each note individually rather than having to play along with, say, a metronome like I did with the bass line. So what I'm going to do is on my third measure here where the notes start in the bass line, I'm going to right click and say create new MIDI region. And I'm just going to trim that MIDI region out to be the same length as the other one. And I'm going to hit Command 4 to open up my piano roll editor. Now to turn on step input, what you have to do is click on this icon right here. This is MIDI in, and it'll turn red. And what this does is it lets you play in notes individually without having to play to a metronome. So if I play a couple notes here, you'll see that they're entered in one by one rather than with the metronome. The other thing we have to keep in mind is what rhythmic value do we want? Eighth notes, 16th notes, quarter notes, whatever. Right now it's creating 16th notes for me. So I want to have eighth notes. I don't want it quite that fast. So the way we can change that is we have to pull up our step input keyboard. And so the way to pull up the step input keyboard is go to Window and then go down to Step Input Keyboard or Show Step Input Keyboard. And the key command for that is Option Command K. So I'm just going to hit Option Command K, and there it is. Now for now, don't worry about the kind of Italian dynamics over here. Just worry about what's over here on the left. Basically what you have are just different rhythms. You have whole note, half note, quarter note, eighth note, 16th, 32nd, and 64th note. There's just different rhythmic durations. You also have dotted values and triplet values. And you can also, it says sustain inserted notes, but it'll also make the playhead jump forward by the rhythm that you select. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select eighth notes, like it has there now, and then just start typing in the rhythm or in the notes I want. The thing you have to be careful with here is if you overlap the notes that you play, it'll actually stack them as a chord. If you want them actually kind of arpeggiated or separated, you have to intentionally leave space between them. Just like that. So here we go. I'm just going to play in my kind of motive for this particular instrument. So there's my motive. I'm going to turn step input off. It's a good idea to make sure you turn this off because you can accidentally start typing in notes if you're just kind of playing around. And I'm going to use my velocity tool like I did before to set all of these velocities to the same value. So hit Command A, hold Option while I engage the velocity tool, pull all the way up or all the way down. There we go. All of them are the same velocity. Close out my piano roll editor and let's listen to what this sounds like. And there we go. Another thing we can do is you can kind of mass edit MIDI data all together. If you just hit Command A to select all, what I'll do is I'll just trim all of these notes with the pointer tool to kind of make more of like a staccato sound to it. Now, another thing to keep in mind when you're kind of watching your MIDI data scroll by in the piano roll editor is if your playhead goes past the screen and the screen doesn't jump with you, what you need to do is you need to turn on this option right here. This is Catch Playhead. And what this will do is it'll make sure that the playhead makes the window, basically what it does is your window follows the playhead no matter what you do. The only problem with this is while you're playing, if you kind of scroll left and right, it automatically turns it off. So you got to just kind of remember not to scroll with the window. And there we go. So this concludes this video, and like I said before, there's a lot to the piano roll editor, so I'll probably do 2 additional videos just on the piano roll editor and how to edit down there. There's a lot of functions that we haven't talked about yet. I've actually had a lot of people ask me how to make a wobble bass like this, or a dirty bass, and I basically just use the ES2. So if you're really interested, you can just copy this patch right here. And there's also, basically I just took this patch and add some effects to it. So if you're really interested, you can take a screenshot of this or just pause the video and program your own ES2 patch. So I hope you enjoyed the video, and thanks again for watching.